Hello there, all my Trump supporting friends, all my MAGA patriots. I'm feeling good. I hope that you are too. It's our responsibility, each one of us, to keep our spirits high. There's no magic bullet, but don't think things are so bad. They're just different, and we have to figure this out. So hopefully this is something that we can all do together. I still have my Trump 2020 sign on the inside window of my front door. So every delivery person, and I pretty much get a delivery every day for something or another. I love doing online shopping. I've never had a bad reaction, and anybody that drives down my cul-de-sac can see it. I think there's a lot of support for Trump out there, but many people are quiet about it and don't want to say anything. I was driving in my neighborhood yesterday, I mean right in the heart of the canyon, which is extraordinarily liberal area, and there was a sign. It was great. Real men working in trees. Real men respect women, we respect the trees, the creation of the trees, something like that. I was so delighted when I came back from the grocery store and went back, because they had the sign facing both ways. I said, yay, real men. All this stuff going on right now. I think about Joe Biden, and I find it a little bit surprising that some people on our side, they say Joe Biden should do this, Joe Biden should do that. As far as I'm concerned, Joe Biden is a Manchurian candidate. He has no mind of his own. Let me repeat, no mind of his own, no leadership of his own, no ability. There was a big deal made, and it really was pretty astounding. He was talking to some, I think, congressional Democrats last week, and he said something to the effect, I'll take questions. And somebody just shut it down. It was like a Zoom call. And you have to ask, who has the authority to shut down the President of the United States? Who has taken it upon themselves to do that? So that was discussed on various news shows and YouTube videos. But one of the things I found telling was how he even said it. Joe Biden. He said, almost like he's asking permission. I can't remember the exact words, but it was something to the effect of, is it okay that I ask questions? And you notice if you do watch him, sort of like, well, where do I go now? And it does remind me of my late husband in his final, I would say, month, when he was losing cognitive capability because of a series, I guess, of strokes, heart attacks, something. He would ask questions like that. It would be like, well, where are we going? And I would constantly be, oh, we're walking over here. This is what's happening. And I look at Joe Biden and I see that. It's so extraordinary that we accept that. So I'm ready for Kamala Harris. I'll tell you why I'm ready for her. She's awful. She's awful, awful, awful. But I'm convinced that if she's the face, and maybe she'll be controlled as well I'm not really sure who's doing the controlling here. But what's interesting about Kamala Harris is people don't like her, including Democrats. I mean, when I listen to Joe Biden now, he doesn't say anything interesting, but he doesn't even sound all that offensive. I mean, because of COVID or whatever, he's not sniffing little girls. He's not doing the creepy things and saying the creepy things I used to hear. And occasionally, I think, it comes and goes. He'll have these short snippets where he sounds strong, sounds good. But they're very short. And you notice they don't like him taking questions. There's a big thing about he's not taking questions, he's not doing this or that. I've watched women in politics for a long time, and I don't think Kamala Harris can get away with that. I don't think even reporters on the left, which they're all on the left now, I don't think they'll accept it. So I'd rather have her up front, taking the questions and saying her awful things that she says. She can't help herself. She has an awful laugh. I mean, the Democrats didn't even like her. Remember that during the primary. So that's going to happen soon, because one of the things that I've observed about people who have cognitive decline is you don't reach a level of cognitive decline, and many of you who know have relatives or older people who have cognitive decline, you'll know the same thing. You've probably noticed it. It doesn't just like, okay, you have a cognitive decline and then you're sort of at the same level. No, once the cognitive decline starts, it kind of accelerates. It accelerates. That's why I find Jill Biden, so offensive. I can't imagine how a loving wife could put her husband through that. I mean, he may think, oh, I like being president or whatever, but he has no leadership capability. I mean, so one of the things I remind myself, and I've actually been very happy, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but one of the things I remind myself is we are resilient people. We are strong. We will get through this. The only thing that's different about this is that it's different. I mean, if you start feeling depressed, read history. Read how bad things were before. That'll give you some perspective. Things are actually pretty good now. They're so good that we make stuff up to get us upset. We make stuff up. So let me just start with COVID as an example. So I was paying an online bill this morning, and this is minor, right? But it's everywhere. So Wells Fargo, my bank, at the top of the page it says, we're here for you. Get the latest details on our COVID-19 resources and support. Now many of you have seen the same thing. What does a bank have to do with that? Well, I guess you could say a business is shut down, whatever. But aside from that, it's this constant drumbeat about COVID-19. If there was not this constant drumbeat, would you even know there was a problem? Would you even know there was a problem? This is a well-known fact. As many of you know, I've had a long-time interest in how the brain works, how the human brain works. And one of the first things I read about this many years ago was that people who worried about local crime, people who watched the evening news, the local evening news broadcasts, were much, much more worried about crime than people who didn't. And that was because when you're watching a program and you're hearing about the crime, that's forefront in your mind. And what the brain does, this is not personal, this is just what the brain does, the human brain does. If you hear something a lot, it takes on increased importance in your mind. Whereas if you don't hear about it, it doesn't seem that important, or you lessen it. And a funny experience happened with that. Both Robert and I, Robert's my stepson, I talk about him a lot because he comes over every Friday. We have wonderful discussions and have fun together. But we're both reading God Saad's book. That's Gadsaad. We're both listening to his book. And he had been on Joe Rogan, the podcaster, interviewer. And so Gadsaad, however you pronounce his name, he asked Joe Rogan, how many Jews do you think there are in the world? I ask you that question. Okay, now just so you know, we're over 7 billion people in the world right now, maybe close to 8 billion. Joe Rogan, he said, just guess, because Joe Rogan said, I don't know, but he guessed, 1 billion? Do you know how hilarious that is? 1 billion Jews in the world? Do you know how off that is? Why did Joe Rogan think that? I mean, he probably didn't really think that hard about it, but why did that huge number pop into his head? Because you hear about Jewish people a lot. They're a big part of our world, our culture, history, everything. So, because he hears about it, he thinks there's a lot of them. I just looked it up because God said something like there was 14 million Jews in the world. And according to, I think what I read on Wikipedia, depending on how you define being Jewish, it's somewhere, let's just say 15 to 18 million. Definitely less than 20 million. He was off by a huge amount. So getting back to COVID, if you're constantly hearing about COVID, and they're constantly talking about the case numbers, and you walk outside and people are wearing masks, you're just constantly thinking about COVID. It's amazing to me. You have to fight that. You have to fight that and say, how real is this? How real is this? And make your own judgment. Because it's not a problem right now. It really is not a problem. If you're someone who has some sort of underlying condition that makes you susceptible, because even older people who don't have underlying conditions, they don't have a problem with COVID. But if you're diabetic, maybe if you have metabolic syndrome, low vitamin D levels, that's huge. So sometimes if you're dark-skinned, if you don't take vitamin D supplements, you're in trouble. And for my case, if I had lung issues or like asthma or weird stuff like that, or immune problems, then I would be a little bit careful. But I don't have any of those things. So one of the things I've found that when I talk to somebody, because I live in a kind of a, how shall we say, a liberal area, or lefty area of the country, of California. When I talk to some of my people I know that read the mainstream media, and I just say flat out to them, I am not worried about COVID. It's kind of interesting the reaction I get. They're like surprised. Like they had never heard that from anybody. I said, I'm not worried about it. Because some of my friends are saying, are you going to take the vaccine? And I said, no. Now, if I had any of those conditions that I was talking about, because I could get the vaccine, I'm over 65, and I'm 67, so I could get on the list and get it. But as I have no problem with people getting it. I think most people who get it are going to be fine. I don't think it's something you have to super worry about. If you think you're susceptible, why not? But I don't. And I don't want to put an experimental vaccine in my body if I don't need it. It kind of, it's like they gin this thing up, and they really ginned it up, okay? To me, there's no question. Here's how I know. When they shut down schools, there's no danger to children. When they shut down schools, and I see little kids wearing masks, you know this is BS. You know something else is going on. And when there were treatments that worked for many people, when I say they, I mean the mainstream media, maybe the pharmaceutical, I don't know who did it, when there were inexpensive treatments for people who got COVID. What's the harm? Let them have it. And they, including the scientific community, ginning up studies. Oh, it's dangerous. You're going to have a problem with heart irregularities. That evidence was so wrong. And then when they did studies on the hydroxychloroquine, and now there's something else, ivermectin, they would not let that information get out. It was misinformation. So those two things, how we treated children, and how we treated older people, okay, I don't even want to get into that. I find that very upsetting. So when I look at that, it's such a one-dimensional view about health. One-dimensional view, because they're not considering all the things that make for a healthy life. Sure, trying not to get too sick is an issue, but that is a minor issue compared to the things people eat now. We have so many people with metabolic, and when you've got a lot of weight on you and you're eating a lot of carbs, I mean, tumors feed on glucose. There's more worries about cancer, heart disease, all kinds of things. And people worry about the wrong stuff. The wrong stuff. Now, we're all going to grow up, get old and die. I mean, but I want to live vibrantly and healthily as long as possible. And so when I see this, where you look at one dimension, and a big one is fear. When you have fear and anxiety, what that does to your body is huge. So to put that on children, and you know a lot of these older people, like in nursing homes, or even maybe the ones that just couldn't have family visit, I think they just died of loneliness. I mean, that is just criminal, okay? Criminal. So take care of your family. I mean, I hug everybody I can. I will say, hey, I want a hug. You okay with giving me a hug? Because I know I live alone. I've read the research. You gotta get hugs. Unfortunately, I get hugs pretty much every day. I am promiscuous in my hugs. I'm not afraid of being close to people. No way. I want my immune system to get some stimulation where I fight things. But I know that's an odd thing, but I'm gonna do it. So let me just tell you, when I pinned my first comment on my last week's video, Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota. I was listening to it as I was getting my video last week uploaded, and I loved what she said. She basically spoke my belief in a way that no other politician has. I don't remember the exact words. I can go back and listen to it. But the basic point was, we should have never shut down. And that is, in my mind, a fact. And I really like Ron DeSantis in Florida. He has also said that he had a great interview last Sunday, I think it was, with Mark Levin. I listened to it twice. And he talked about his approach, what he did. I mean, he's just a good governor. But he said, I've heard him say on multiple occasions, this should never happen again. Never. We were caught off guard, including our president, President Trump, who's a doer, okay? We were caught off guard in listening to these so-called medical experts, and they were not medical experts, because there were many other medical experts, the wrong medical experts, the Dr. Fauci, Deborah Birx type people. Wrong. And we shut everything down. And we naively thought 2 weeks. Even I thought, well, so what, 2 weeks? We can do it. It's kind of novel. It was kind of interesting. But here's the thing, you can't do that. Once you get something started, how do you stop it? Because as soon as, remember when President Trump wanted to reopen on Easter last year? The pushback he got was enormous, enormous. He couldn't do it. Once you shut down, you're stuck. So, never again. We did it to ourselves. Yes, China did it. China did it. China had the virus. China let it out of the country. That was terrible. But we still have to have a plan of our own in what we do. Because they could just do it again. It's so absurd. So we know what happens. Never, ever again. What we should do is say who's vulnerable and help them, but never take away their choice. And this is what Governor Kristi Noem talked about. You give people the information, but you never, ever take away their choice. Never. Don't let them do that to you. That's where civil disobedience comes in. You're not going to tell me what I do about my health. And please, if people, so one of the things that happened with all these masks it wasn't just the government micromanaging how you handle this. Well, I'm sorry, I feel like I know a lot more how to take good care of my health, including doctors but certainly public health officials. I know a lot more about taking care of my health than they do. And so I have scorn for some of the things that they recommend. And I'm constantly, there's a lot of good information. A lot of people who think the way I do about various things. And I like getting new input. And so I watch the video. I mean, there's wonderful information out there. Wonderful information. If that's your hobby, if that's what you like to do. But if you find that hard to do, to think, to question the experts. I was talking to this with Kathy, the woman who does my hair. Very smart woman. And I said, Kathy, it would be as if some government official starts making pronouncements about hair, like this isn't good and that's good. And you're like, no, that's not true. I know how to do hair. Why would I listen to them when I've had years of experience doing this and how to do it right? That doesn't mean she doesn't want to learn new things. There's difference. Same thing with parents who take care of children. So some pediatrician or some doctor, there's a new recommendation, you should do this or that. And a good parent who's attentive to their child, they know what works and what doesn't work. Also, they have instincts about what works and doesn't work. Because these are the instincts, and when I say instincts, this is what enabled humans to survive. We had certain feelings about what to do. So a lot of these things, these shortcuts, or listening to authorities, that might have been, I mean, in other contexts, it worked. You listen to the elders of the tribe, say you were in a tribe. You listen to the elders because they knew more than the younger people. So we have a tendency to listen to the elders. So think about where it came from, but never give up your own judgment. And so one of the things I feel is my job is to not spread fear. Every time I walk out, every time I smile at people, and now I smile at people even with masks, I'm friendly. I think it's important that we not give in to this fear. Each one of us, because that's what they would love. They want to beat us down. Because it's easy to get that way where you just get tired. And this is what happens in communist countries. I've mentioned this before. It happens in countries with totalitarian governments. People just kind of keep to themselves and they lose, we would lose what makes us Americans. Just don't let that happen. Don't let it happen. And Unfortunately, nobody ever bothers me about the mask anymore. Because I'm just waiting for it. Just try. It's like, I love to argue with these people. But nobody's doing that anymore, I notice. And the absurdity of it is incredible, but I'm glad that some places are opening up. Like Texas and now Mississippi, we have and no more mask mandates. But even with no mask mandates, some places are like, well, we still got to wear masks. It gives people a false sense of security, but it's so, you have to remember, it doesn't do any good, okay? It really doesn't do any good. I mean, the only way I could see it could do good is if you were like in a hospital setting and people are, spraying fluids all over you and coughing in your face. Well, yeah, a mask would be appropriate in that setting. But we've got people walking by themselves outdoors. I live in this beautiful area, not far from the beach, fresh air. And I think, do people, it just looks so incredibly absurd. I would be so embarrassed. You're walking by yourself, beautiful, and you got this big, what are you, in a hospital? And you're wearing a mask? I feel, I have to admit, I feel scorn. Not for people who are doing it for their job, because in order to keep their job, right now, they have to do it. But anybody else who doesn't have to do it and puts on a mask, I'm like kind of laughing to myself. I look at them like, really? But I have learned something from this, and that is, even if I disagree with what people are doing, I'm not going to say anything. They have a right to wear a mask. They have a right to be an idiot if they want to. In the past, I was like, oh, how could you wear a mask? I didn't want to get in an argument with them. But then I realized, for people who think I should wear a mask, I don't like that. So I have become much more freedom for other people, including, somebody who wants to smoke, somebody who wants to do all the things I think are bad for your health. No, it's not for me to say or judge. They have the freedom to do it. So think about that, and just stay away from news about COVID. Just stay away from it. Why are we hearing about cancer, for example? I mean, we've done horrible things regarding cancer. I don't believe in cancer screening. If you have symptoms, then I would go get it checked out. But no cancer screening. Don't go looking for problems. Because I think a lot of the treatments that are done, we're finding cancers too early that would have gone away on their own. But then a person would say, oh, I'm a survivor. I survived. I'm so glad they caught it early. No, I don't agree with that. So people would get mutilated. Their bodies mutilated, both with chemotherapy, which is very strong. I mean, it's just toxicity for your whole body. Radiation, which can hurt, although we do try to target it. Or things cut off. That used to distress me. And then also the way we treat heart disease and things like that. So I've long been bothered by overtreatment in the medical realm, because I don't think we know. We're good in some things. Let me go back. We are really good in some things in medicine, but in other things we're wrong, because the mind, and I'm not talking about just the conscious mind, but the unconscious mind has a huge, huge effect on your life. Huge effect. And I know that because, as I've said before, my mother was healthy. But when my dad died, she was like, not quite 86, but she was very healthy. She was dead in 6 days. Talk about the mind and what it can do to your body. That said that to me more than anything. And I don't fault her for that. Grief is really tough. And to lose a partner that you've had, 65, whatever years, I'm glad you didn't have to go through that. But don't kid yourself. That is huge. That's why a mother's or a father's tender loving care for a child, the reassurance, that's so important, so important. Another thing I was thinking about, I'm not going to do it, but we should have a translation dictionary. Somebody needs to do what these woke terms really mean. So I just came up with a few, and you can come up with a few. But right now there's this talk on the left, and by that I mean mainstream media, social media, the Democrats. We need to prevent misinformation. Well, prevent misinformation just means censorship, okay? Communist-style censorship. And censorship of views we don't agree with. That's what that means, prevent disinformation. Fact checker used to mean you would literally check your facts. The way I check my facts, like when I was trying to say how many Jewish people are in the world, I'd heard, 14 million, but I thought, let me look it up. I checked that fact. But fact checkers, and this just sort of started recently, where they have these official fact checkers. It's really any fact that doesn't fit the narrative, period. What's another one? Insurrection. Insurrection means a mostly peaceful protest by Trump supporters and people who wandered into the Capitol. Do you remember? Nobody had any weapon charges. I think a total of 5 people died, and 1 was shot. An unarmed woman was shot and killed. But there was no insurrection. I don't even want to say that. As soon as you start getting defensive, there was no insurrection. The use of the term insurrection, first of all, there's a bogus election where Trump won big. This is my view. He probably got 80 million votes. His support was so strong. So, in certain states, they did certain things just to get enough to get Biden to win, this Manchurian candidate. And maybe they just are afraid. Oh my God, we just stole it. I don't know what their reasoning is, but to call that an insurrection, that is disgusting to use that term. And then you had this Capitol Police officer. Just remember this. If you are reading the mainstream media, you are getting bad information, period. So you had this Capitol policeman, Brian Sicknick. And even though he went home that day and texted his brother, and he died the next day of something, we don't really know exactly what, but not necessarily related to the Capitol. People, when they get older, a lot of excitement, maybe he breathed some pepper spray or something. But he died the next day. But yet, I don't know which newspaper, maybe it was the New York Times, all the news kept saying he was hit in the head by a fire extinguisher, and that's what killed him. So they were repeating misinformation, more than misinformation, an outright lie that was not fact-checked in the real sense of the word. He said that over and over and over and over again. And then they even had a big funeral for him much later on the Capitol. to just like, oh, look at what these Trump supporters did. And Brian Switnick was also a Trump supporter. So what actually happened there? I think the FBI knows. Just like they knew about the Hunter Biden laptop, with all that damning information about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. Damning information. So it's not that the FBI doesn't know. This is my view. But they are so corrupt. I just have to accept that now as a fact. They're so corrupt. Can you imagine asking FBI Director Christopher Wray, how did Officer Switnick die? We know how he died. I mean, we know enough. But what did he answer to the congressional questioners? He said, we're still investigating. And this was like 2 months later. What is there to investigate? What is there to investigate? So what I realized, same with the Hunter Biden laptop. They know. They're just not answering the question. They're just not bringing up the information. So just know, the FBI is corrupt right now. They are an arm of the leftist, globalist, whatever. And for whatever reason, Christopher Wray and others are not taking it on. Did you see that? I mean, it was so, just listen to him. It's like, wow. Wow. It was so bad. So bad. One of the other things I've noticed, or made this connection for myself. Again, I used to be so angry about when I was discovering about the whole climate change things. But look at the corollaries between climate alarmism and COVID alarmism. Both of them basically look at one variable for something that's hugely complex. So in the case of climate, it's CO2 emissions. Like that is a control knob for the climate. Now you can argue about how much of a control knob it is. I'm so disgusted with the field that I actually don't know. But I don't think that's the issue. Because if you want to think of it as like, well, it's kind of a greenhouse gas, even though historically there's been no correlation between that and temperature, except when it gets warm, then CO2 levels go up because the oceans can hold CO2 outgas when it gets warm. And when it gets cold, they suck it in. So it comes later. But now, since we're raising CO2 levels a little bit, but not at a high level compared to the history of the Earth. It's not high at all. But you've got a whole group of people thinking, and I include scientists in this, not scientists that really understand the climate and atmospheric physics. But you've got to look at all the other scientists who don't know about that. So if some scientific group says this, well, I'm a scientist, I believe the science. So you will have a lot of scientists, the ones that haven't looked into it. But the ones that get curious, many people, including engineers, are the best for this. They think, I'm interested in this subject. It's an important subject. They start researching. You don't find people who look into this, really look into it, who suddenly go, oh my God, it's really a problem. I hadn't thought it was a problem, but now I think it's a problem. It's always the other way. It's always the other way. Just like there's no walk-away movement of conservatives becoming leftists. It's always the other way. The more information you have, the more you look into things, it tends to go in one direction. Think about that. But here you have, so what occurred to me, I mean, I subscribe to a lot of energy newsletters. Like there's a thing called Energy in Depth. And if I look at the newsletter, sometimes I just, okay, because you even look at the oil companies and you think, oh, oil company. So they will talk about renewables, they will talk about net zero. There's this net zero thing, you know, where the world is transitioning away from fossil fuels to renewables. And I thought, these corporations, we should know better. They're doing the same thing as the corporations who are now using the woke language on other issues, like institutional racism, you know, you can't, but we all know what's going on in that area right now. You know, remember Gillette and when they ran those ads about toxic masculinity. So corporations, they don't want to be picked on, if you will. So they toe the line. Now, certainly oil companies and others are doing the same thing. They're repeating it so much about, like, it's a fact. It's a fact that the world is transitioning away from fossil fuels and into renewables. Well, I don't think they are. That would be ruinous. That would be ruinous. Because, let me tell you, China and India are not going to do it. Just some of the white guilt, I'm going to call it white guilt, lefties in the industrialized nations. I mean, why else? No, don't do it. And when I say don't do it, what I mean by that is, I hate that, we need a translation dictionary. Clean energy. Oh my God, it's not clean energy. It's not even green energy, okay? Green is what CO2 provides for plants. The earth has gotten greener. Let me repeat that again. The earth has gotten greener since our CO2 levels have gone out. That's a fact. That's a fact. Even scientists know that's a fact. And scientists know this too, so you can say this it's not opinion. Plants need less water the more CO2 there is in the air. So remember those two facts. So I consider myself green. I consider myself an environmentalist. I do not want to ruin all these natural, beautiful landscapes by covering them with toxic solar panels, which is a diffuse source of energy. I don't want to kill all the birds and it's not good for your health, that the infrasound, that with those turbines, I mean, if you live anywhere near that is not good for your health. That, when you don't necessarily even hear it, but I don't like it. It's bad for your human health. It's bad for animal life. It's bad for the scenery. You want the most compact energy source you can get. And right now it's fossil fuels, but it's beautiful for nuclear. And we can make such safe nuclear things. I mean, if you don't think that's true, we have nuclear submarines, people. I think since the 50s. Nuclear submarines. How many nuclear submarine accidents have happened? Because that's the only way you can do it and stay under the ocean. All our navy's nuclear submarines. Have you ever heard a problem from that? Small, compact, portable, and a concentrated source of energy. Nuclear submarines. Think about it. Think about all the things that we could do using nuclear power in small, compact sources. And then keeping our environment beautiful. That's what I want. So I was reading a few things, and what's interesting to me is, here was a statement, I'll take it, in one of these articles. We're building a clean power infrastructure to fight climate change. Think about that. That's what somebody wrote. We're building a clean power infrastructure to fight climate change. And somebody else wrote, we need a stable climate. Hello? Do you really think, first of all, it's not a clean power infrastructure. It's a messy, dirty, you gotta buy all these, all this stuff from China. And then you have all this toxic waste. So it's not clean. But do you really think that if we did that, we have a stable climate? The Earth has never had a stable climate. What the heck? What we have now is humans have been able to cover the globe because we have energy. So if it's a blizzard outside, you can stay warm inside. If you didn't have energy, oh my God, you're gonna be dead. If you had no way of staying warm and taking care of yourself, or if it was swelteringly hot and you don't have air conditioning, and you can't communicate, you can't do all this stuff. Fossil fuels right now, fossil fuels are the way to get that. But you can make fossil fuels so that it's clean. And we've done that. I grew up with smog, a lot of smog. And you see in areas like in India and China, I mean, they have smog. It's awful. But we don't. It's wonderful. I mean, the smog was so depressing. It was so depressing. Now, granted, I live close to the ocean, so maybe you go inland, but I basically don't see the smog as much. So anywhere there's smog, I want to get rid of it. But you don't do that by going to clean energy. Oh my God, it's so absurd. But anyway, one of the things I have had to recognize, and I keep working on this in my own mind, is I used to, I read a lot of history and the past, and I've often thought, oh my God, what if I lived in the Middle Ages? What if I lived at this time? What if I lived at that time? And how, to me, unbearable that would be. But I realize it's really, well, technology has done some really, really wonderful stuff. Really wonderful stuff. But in terms of people's thinking, it's really not that different. It's really not that different. You tell a lie enough, you keep using the words enough, and people think it's real. Like Joe Rogan with 1 billion Jews in the world. I mean, he's no dummy. Why did he think that? It's really interesting. So you've got to constantly fight that. And then, because there are experts in a lot of things. So you want to get a variety of views, and you got to think it through for yourself. But if you're going to look at an expert, ask yourself, is there an accepted way to talk about this? Is there political pressure to talk about something in a certain way? And Mark Miller, who writes really lovely, in-depth comments, and I have a couple of you that do that. Robert's another one, and Bambi. Anyway, I love, and I can't answer in kind, because if I'm going to write an essay, it takes me a lot of, I have to think about it. I have to think about it and compose it. It's work. So I'm thinking with Mark, how do you do this, Mark? You have all these great essays that you write, but it just must fly off your keyboard. But when I did the one on Texas blackouts, he was referring to Richard Lindzen, who's an MIT professor, very good, who was what we would call a climate skeptic, but a really, really, really knowledgeable. People could not argue with him. He knew his stuff, okay? So he was critical of all the alarmist arguments, but no, of course in a very low-key way, and from a scientific point of view, it was very interesting to listen to him. So one of the things that Mark remembered from the Q&A afterwards, and I'm quoting, he said that Richard Lindzen said that there's so much political pressure inside the field that you can't just take what scientists say at face value. Because you have to understand that their careers are on the line if they say one thing or another about the climate. You could think of it like they're on a leash. So, and Mark pointed out what also I had noticed when I was getting Nature and Science magazine and I would read the articles. So somebody would do research, and if you really carefully read their research, didn't really support the alarmist position. But then at the end, like out of the blue, and they hadn't even studied it, they would say, however, climate change is real. This does not negate climate change. Even though, if you read what they actually wrote, it did. I mean, I noticed that myself. It was like, whoa, I'm seeing this in all the articles. It's almost like you had to put that caveat in, or you could not get published. So you look at their data and it all fits with what you'd expect of scientific findings, but the poison pill comes when they write their conclusions. Because they'll say something about how human activity is causing global warming, when the real content of their paper had nothing to do with that. Amen. They feel that they have to put that in, though, because if they don't, they'll lose their funding. Well, I don't necessarily think they'll lose their funding. I don't think it's so much that. I think it's to get it published. And I knew that right away. When the editorial board of Science magazine, think about it, said climate change is a big issue. I mean, that was a political position. So do you think that they're going to publish a paper that says otherwise? And that's how I knew that Lancet study, which is a medical journal that came out against hydroxychloroquine, it was such a bad study, but I looked it up. But just a few weeks before that, they had said President Trump, and this is from Great Britain, I mean, the Lancet, President Trump should not be reelected. He's terrible. And that's a medical journal. What is that? Why are they getting into politics? So they found this horrible study by cardiologists. What do they know about pulmonary kinds of diseases like COVID? Because I looked at that carefully, and I talked about it in one of my videos. And it was basically that hydroxychloroquine was bad, and I mean, it was such a shoddy study. I looked at that, I thought, how did that happen? And sure enough, a couple weeks later, or whatever, it was like retracted. But I knew right away that the Lancet, because they had said that President Trump is bad, is going to look and accept. So anybody that comes up with some article that seems to support that conclusion will get in. So it's hugely, hugely about getting published, because you know, in that field, publish or perish. So I don't think it's just about losing their funding. I mean, I know about funding like at Caltech, and some of the funding is just funding. There is some good research, like material science, for example. I mean, there was a lot of good research and earthquake research. I mean, I love that stuff. There was many, many good areas. But if you start getting into one of these narratives, I don't trust it. Like, I just saw a headline the other day that somebody who was researching COVID just said, I'm not doing it anymore, because they were getting attacked because of what they found. I mean, what happens is you start to self-censor, and you just don't, the good scientists aren't looking at that. So right now, COVID research is corrupted, polluted. You got to be very careful about what you think. Climate science is totally corrupted. So you look at someone who has no stake in the game. That's why I love like someone like Tony Heller, very clear thinker. And there's so many others who still try and still talk about it. And it's so obvious. I mean, the absurdity, okay, it's there. Now, here's another interesting thing, minor, about, I was just reading about this. How do you extinguish an electrical vehicle battery fire? Because, you know, there's this big push to go electrical vehicles. And I've talked about this some. Why would you want to build things that are more dependent on the electric grid when we're having trouble providing electric power? That's like the worst place to go, okay? I don't mind some people having electric cars here and there, whatever. But if you had everybody having an electric car, it'd be a bad idea. But there is a problem with lithium batteries. Also, they're very, very toxic. And just getting the lithium, because if all of a sudden you have all of these people needing these batteries, our supply needs go up hugely. But let me just quote you what I read. So the writer of this article, this was from What's Up With That, the site. This guy asked a firefighter friend, how do you extinguish electric vehicle battery fires? And the guy said, you can't. You cordon off the area and spray a fine mist of water on the fire to keep the temperature down until it finishes burning. It takes a few days until it's safe. My friend Tom was telling me things that he had read where some people, they had a battery fire and they were burned, you couldn't even identify the body. Now another thing is these fumes are highly toxic. It's not like burning wood or something. It's really bad. Now I'm not saying at some point we'll figure out, like in the article that I read, so maybe we could put like a little containment structure over it. But the point is, there's a lot of problems with electric vehicles, which are kind of manageable as long as you don't have too many electric vehicles on the road. So there's no long lines at a charging station, there's all kinds of things. You're not putting a huge amount of stuff on the grid. But why? Electric vehicles have been around since the internal combustion engine. And in fact, early on, women liked it because it was very hard to start. They didn't have starters, so it was too hard for the women, you know, to like pull the whatever and make it happen. Okay, and then the final thing I want to talk about and have I said I love President Trump? I love President Trump. I'm glad he's getting a rest. But as soon as he starts recommending people in the primaries, I'm sending money to everybody he recommends. Just, even if it's just a small amount. And I'm not sending money to any Republican Party organization. But be wary of that, because what happens, I've noticed, is they'll try to use Trump's name to get you roped in. No. I'm going to wait until Trump says. And we're going to get rid of these rhinos who are changing the Republican Party. But let me say something about Andrew Cuomo. I do not like him, okay? I do not like him. But this has to do with the sort of the Me Too stuff. I have some different views on that. Because I looked at some of the things that he did, and except for having a woman who works directly for him, you got to be very, very careful. Are we saying that a single person, when I say single, I mean like not married, cannot flirt with anybody? Can't have banter? Where do you meet people? You never, like, for example, if he was harassing a woman and threatening her job if she didn't, like, comply, or obviously making her very uncomfortable because she worked for him, or he implied that you're not with me, then I'm not going to let you get a job anywhere. But if they make threats like that, well, gosh darn it, record it. You've got an iPhone, record any of those threats, okay? But, I mean, they showed something where he was joking about a sausage or whatever, and I thought, so what, okay? It's just too much. I don't like what he did with the nursing home deaths. I don't like what he's done to New York with all the, shutting down of really good energy sources. I mean, I just think he's ruining New York. But I don't care if he flirts and tries to have fun with women or whatever. It's just too much. And I was having this discussion with Robert. Now, Robert is, I would say, shy. But I was talking to him. I said, Robert, you wouldn't have met Janelle. I mean, they're not divorced, but you wouldn't have your son because she was at work. So she was like an administrative assistant. Would that make him kind of her boss? And I loved what Robert said. He said, well, when you think about work and you think about people meeting and having kids, the meeting and having kids is the most important thing. Because humans wouldn't survive if we didn't do that. How do people meet members of the opposite sex? You don't want to just do it on dating apps because that's too superficial. So you can meet them at church, you can meet them at school, and you can meet them at work. We don't want to take that away. That's crazy. It's crazy. And I'm from a different generation. I like to flirt, and I will flirt. I won't flirt with a married man. So sometimes I need to know, are you single? But if you're single, I'll flirt. I never flirt with another woman's husband. That's just wrong. Or longtime boyfriend or whatever. If you're attached, I'm not even going to flirt with you. But I'll flirt with you if you're single. Okay? That doesn't mean I want to get together with you necessarily, but it's fun. It's an interaction. I mean, why would you want to get rid of that? But then I was thinking about an experience I had. I've worked in male-dominated fields all my life. How have I managed to avoid that sort of thing? And I'm going to end with a kind of a funny story. I think it's funny, but it's also illustrative. When I was working on the campaign in Little Rock, so I was on the issue staff. This is the Clinton campaign, 1992. And James Carville was, in the war room, but then there's a glass and there was issue staff. And he was with his fiancée, I guess, Mary Matlin, but she was working for George Bush. So they had made an agreement that they weren't going to talk or get together during that time, so that they wouldn't inadvertently give campaign secrets. Because, James Carville is the one that put the sign up that said, it's the economy, stupid. So for whatever reason, I was like his flirt person. I mean, he flirted with me a lot. But I remember one time, it was harmless. He never, came on to me. Because he's in love with Mary Matlin, and I'm married as well. But he would always, be paying attention to me and things like that. But I remember one time, so I'm on the phone, I'm sitting at this little desk, because it's so busy. And he came in, and I think he was I can't remember what he was doing. It was something like kind of throwing a little Nerf ball at me. And I just said, quit harassing me. And I meant harassing, not like sexual harassing, but like quit bothering me. But I used the word harassing. And I literally, he jumped back and said, I'm not harassing you. I go, oh, relax, just stop it, okay? I just meant quit bothering me. But it occurred to me that there are some powerful words that women could use. If you think someone's harassing you, use that term. Quit harassing me, okay? Because that means something very specific in today's world. You know, I'm much more of a mind to get women to fight back, okay? Just say that. Quit harassing me. Sure worked with James Carville. On that funny note. Oh, I'm not going to talk to you next week. I actually have plans, and so it'll be 2 weeks. Meanwhile, it's been fun, and stay healthy, stay strong. We're going to get through this. Oh, I'm going to say one more thing. I have my Trump sticker up, as I think maybe I already mentioned that, but it's on my window at the front door, and I'm repeating myself, but I know there's a lot of support for Trump out there, and I'm sorry, I just repeated myself. Anyway, this is fun, and I enjoy talking to you all. So stay strong. We'll get through this, and we're going to be stronger than before, and we need to clean out that Republican Party, and we're going to win.